This is AI Command App Media Lens. Every day, the same stories get told differently depending on who's telling them. Here are today's top stories and what happens when you read them side by side. Story 1. The Victory Day Parade in Moscow. Russia held its annual Red Square military parade on Friday. Multiple major outlets covered it. Almost none framed it the same way. The BBC's Russia editor led with atmosphere that this year's parade felt very different, with less of the heavy military hardware Russia normally uses to project power. A separate BBC piece focused on Putin's words, headlining that he denounces NATO. That's a framing centered on what Putin said. The Wall Street Journal headlined it differently. Putin presides over downsized military parade as Ukraine war drags on. That phrasing connects the parade directly to the ongoing war. The New York Times went further. A less muscular Victory Day parade shows Putin's growing vulnerability. That headline doesn't just describe the event, it tells you what it means. NPR took yet another angle, leading with security. Moscow marks Victory Day with a Red Square parade under tight security, noting a U.S.-brokered three-day ceasefire in the background. Same parade, four lenses. The BBC frames it as observation, the Journal frames it as a war story, the Times frames it as a sign of weakness, NPR frames it as a security event. None are wrong, but each one points your attention somewhere different, and a reader who only sees one will walk away with a different sense of what mattered. Story 2. The Iran war and the ongoing ceasefire negotiations. The U.S. is awaiting an Iranian response to ceasefire proposals. That's the same underlying news. Where outlets diverge is what they put up front. The Wall Street Journal has been running an economic angle. One piece, Iran war puts the world's most used chemical in short supply, frames the conflict as a global supply chain story. Another journal headline reads, Muted U.S. response to Iranian attacks deepens Gulf fears about ceasefire. Frame, regional anxiety. The Hill ran multiple political frame pieces, one titled Gulf Crisis Weakens Trump's Hand in His Coming Talks with Xi, Connects Iran to U.S.-China Strategy. Another Maher ribs Trump over Game of Chicken with Iran, roots the conflict through a late-night comedy commentator. The Guardian led with diplomacy. U.S. awaiting response from Iran over proposals for ceasefire deal, says Rubio. That headline puts the State Department message front and center. NPR ran an explainer interview with an expert on Iranian politics, context first. What this tells you, when an outlet's first instinct is economics, you get supply chains. When it's politics, you get strategy and personalities. When it's diplomacy, you get statements. The same conflict can read like a market story, a horse race, or a history lesson, depending on the desk that wrote it. Story 3. The Frontier Airlines runway incident in Denver. A Frontier Airlines flight bound for Los Angeles struck a pedestrian on the runway during takeoff at Denver International Airport. Authorities say the person had jumped a perimeter fence. At least 7 major outlets covered it within hours. PBS NewsHour, NPR, and the BBC all led with the victim, pedestrian killed, strikes and kills pedestrian. Subject first headlines that center the human cost. The New York Times went a different direction. Frontier jet aborts takeoff as pilots report hitting person on Denver runway. That headline centers the pilots and includes the word report, a hedge that signals the facts are still being established. ABC News used the most cautious language of all. The plane appeared to strike an individual. The Hill chose the regulatory frame, NTSB investigating reported pedestrian strike. Notice the spectrum. Some outlets state what happened in plain terms, a person died. Others foreground uncertainty. It's reported, it appears, the NTSB is investigating. Both can be defensible journalism, but the reader experience is genuinely different. One leaves you with a death, the other leaves you with an open question. Story 4. Hungary swears in a new prime minister. Peter Magyar was sworn in as Hungary's prime minister. ending Viktor Orban's long tenure. Three major outlets ran the story very differently. The Hill's framing was era-driven. Hungary enters post-Orbán era after new prime minister sworn in. Past tense for Orbán, future tense for Hungary. The New York Times led with the man. Peter Magyar takes over as Hungary's leader from Viktor Orbán. Personality first. The Times also ran a follow-up. In Hungary, Viktor Orbán loyalists jump ship. A defection narrative angle. The BBC's headline used scare quotes around a politically loaded phrase, Hungary's new PM to be sworn in during regime change party. Those quotation marks do a lot of work. They distance the BBC from the term while still using it. Quote marks are an editorial choice. They can flag a phrase as someone else's language, or they can subtly invite skepticism. Same three letters, different signal depending on how they're worn. Story 5. Congressional Redistricting and the Midterm Map. A series of court rulings has reshaped congressional districts in several states. 6 outlets covered it. The language is where it gets interesting. PBS NewsHour ran an explainer titled, The Latest Congressional Redistricting Changes and What to Know. Neutral, civic, you the reader framing. NPR ran 2 pieces. One read, Southern Republicans redistrict after Supreme Court rules, Dems lose big in Virginia. Another said the redistricting could prop up Republicans against an unfavorable national mood. The verb prop up is doing editorial work. It implies artificial support. The New York Times ran multiple analytical pieces. How Republicans gained an edge on the midterm House map over 10 days, and 2 court decisions have unleashed an era of perpetual redistricting. Gained an edge reads as competitive. Era of perpetual redistricting reads as institutional change. The Hill framed it as a Democratic loss. Virginia redistricting ruling deals blow to Democrats' midterm hopes. Game and team framing. The Guardian called it Republican dominance of the redistricting fight. Same court rulings, same maps. The verbs alone tell you a lot. Prop up, gain an edge, deal a blow, dominate. Each one is technically describing the same outcome, but each one nudges you toward a different feeling about it. That's today's Media Lens from AI Command App. Same stories, different lenses. See you tomorrow.